Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. This is our Legends edition, and you'll notice in the picture frame to my left, your right, we don't have Vincent Turner today. Our producer and engineer is still Jeremiah Long. Thank you, Jeremiah, for putting everything together for us. But Vincent had a family visit he needed to take, so replacing him is Brian LeBel. Brian, welcome to the show. And before we get started, this is the morning after. We get to talk about the Super Bowl, the commercials, and talk about all of the halftime show and other things that were a part of last night's production. But I want to talk about the game. What did you think, first and foremost? Eagles, Kansas City. Did anything impress you or make you wonder, wow, that is something I certainly didn't expect to happen in yesterday's action?
I think it being so reminiscent of Mahomes playing Brady the time that they played in the Super Bowl. I think the Bucs defense compared to the Eagles defense was very similar. He was running around seemingly for his life for most of the game. They couldn't seem to block anybody up front. At a certain point, I came to the realization that, hey, it's not that the Chiefs are bad necessarily. It's not that they don't have it. It's that the Eagles front seven and Vic Fangio and everything they got going on is just that good. It was kind of eye-opening because there were some games earlier in the year where you thought, hey, because I know, hey, the Falcons beat them in Philadelphia, and you thought, hey, maybe these guys aren't as good as anticipated or maybe as good as advertised, but they shut a lot of that down real quick as far as their postseason run, what they did against Washington offensively too. It seemingly they were unmatched, and it was not really something that was anticipated because obviously it's the Chiefs, it's Patrick Mahomes, it's Andy Reid, it's Travis Kelce, it's larger than life stuff. And regardless of how bad they looked earlier in the year, whether it be against Buffalo or whoever they were playing, they always seem to get it done when it mattered the most. And yesterday, they just didn't seem to get anything done or get anything going.
Yeah, it was really interesting from a statistical standpoint. They were kind of average on offense, but yet 15-2, there's nothing average about that. So the Chiefs offense was, in my opinion, struggling throughout most of the night. The pressure that was relentless by the front four. You didn't have to blitz, and I think that paid off. Having an extra guy in the secondary to tip a pass or to deflect something or to get an interception, pick sixes, whatever you say. It was a punctuation mark for how good the defense was. I mean, just outstanding job. Vic Fangio, you mentioned him, and he had never beaten a Mahomes team as a professional. So that was a very interesting side note that made it easier for anyone to go, hey, Kansas City's going to blow them out. Fangio's he hasn't figured out Kansas City yet, but a great game. If you're an Eagle fan, tough loss, but still, our adoration goes to any team that would have a chance to break a record like Kansas City did. But most importantly, I think Philadelphia just said, not today, not on our dime. We're here for good, and we're going to show you why. They played with a passion that was relentless, both offensively and defensively. And you got to congratulate the Eagles. They did Fly, Eagles Fly, and EAGLES. They had a great crowd there rooting for them, even though everybody else that you saw was a celebrity. But the Eagle Nation certainly showed up there in New Orleans.
Yeah, I think I was reading a stat. I don't think the Eagles sent more than 4 guys all night. They didn't have to. Yeah. Funny enough. I will say this for Kansas City. I think they deserve to be there. I think a lot of times when you get blowouts like that, you say, oh, maybe the other conference is weaker or whatever goes on. I think they deserved it, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them sort of replicate what they did against Tampa. I believe it was 2020. Was it the 2021 Super Bowl where they lost to the Bucs, where they just revamped everything? I don't know if they brought a single guy on the offensive line back, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do something similar this year. They say, hey, listen, the goal isn't to get there, with who we are, because we've already won 2. The goal is to revamp everything. So they may just clean house and say, hey, we got to protect our, $500 million quarterback and keep him upright and be able to let him throw the football down the field. But kudos to the Eagles. You go sign Saquon Barkley, all these draft picks. I mean, I don't know if there's a pick within the first 4 or 5 rounds that they've missed on, really, in the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, I think Jordan Mailata, their left tackle, I believe he was like a 6th-round pick, and he's one of the best players in the league at his position. So Roseman's done a phenomenal job. Their front office has done a phenomenal job as far as scouting talent, bringing guys in, and then plugging them into whatever system they're running, because they're really good too. They're having coach turnover as well. I wouldn't be surprised if Fangio either gets head coaching consideration. I think Kellen Moore is already, handshake under the table, the head coach of the Saints. But they continue to retool. They continue to keep getting there. They continue to win, and it's impressive.
Yeah, the front four, you mentioned them a little bit earlier, did such an amazing job of not only getting to the quarterback, but doing extra sprints and chasing him down, or at least chasing him out of the pocket and keeping the pressure on him. I think that really bothered Mahomes. Most guys, you can get there, but you don't have the speed or the endurance to continue the play when he gets outside the pocket. He's able to elude those guys. Struggled mightily with that. And then they give Jalen Hurts a little bit of props, because here's the guy. Their offense couldn't have been as further apart. Running game was number one in the league. The passing game was in the high 20s or low 30s. But boy, did they turn that around. They couldn't run the ball for beans, and they did a fantastic job, in my opinion, of being able to get it down the field through the air. Obviously, a couple of big touchdowns, getting the ball and distributing it evenly with your wide receivers, your tight ends, and running backs. Just a great job. Congratulations again to the Eagles. And we also want to congratulate at the end, third quarter, right? Maybe not the exact end of it, but congratulations are in order to 3 of the 4 Hall of Famers. Sterling Sharp was not able to be there for whatever reason, but they had Eric Allen, Jared Allen, and Antonio Gates. And today we want to talk about Antonio Gates and give some props out to this amazing athlete that is a two-sport star in a different sport than what most. We've talked about a lot of baseball players in the past who've excelled in football, but this guy did it on the hardwood. And what I love about Antonio Gates is that his story is not only unique, but he knew it from a very early age that he wanted to be special. He wanted to be a professional athlete, and he set his mind to it. So first thoughts about Antonio Gates and his induction into the Hall of Fame just a couple of days ago. It was on Thursday evening that he found out about it, and by Sunday he was at the game and being celebrated. He'll get a gold jacket in August.
Well, I don't want to say he's an honorary saint, being down there, but I think what he did for Drew Brees early in his career, I think he's going to get a lot of props from the people down in New Orleans. But Antonio was, if you look at his early career as far as collegiate stuff, as far as basketball, he was Mr. Transfer Portal before it was cool. He was bouncing around a lot. He had some trouble academically. He had to get that sorted out, but everywhere he went, he seemed to figure out whatever he needed to figure out, and he got it done. He was originally recruited Michigan State to be a 2-sport guy where, his coaches were just Tom Izzo and Nick Saban, no big deal as far as the collegiate ranks, just 2 regular guys. But I think Nick Saban sat him down, said something along the lines of, "Hey, son, listen, I think you're a better football player, and I think you have a more outstanding career if you stick to this, and I'd like you to do that," which he wasn't promised initially, which drove him out. And he said, "Hey, listen, that could be the case, but I really love the game of basketball, and I think for what it's worth, his numbers kind of back that up for that he was good enough." And I think you were saying something along the lines of his original transfer.
Well, yeah, let's look into Antonio Ethan Gates, born on June 18th, 1980. In Detroit, Michigan, and he went to Central High School there and was a part of the Trailblazers staff. Well, not staff, but athletically as a football and a basketball player there. He grew up in some, a tougher neighborhood, and he said that he had a choice, like a lot of guys, either play sports or you could end up hanging around with a lot of the wrong people. Football and basketball is where he excelled. He was 6'4". Back in high school, he was probably about 220, 25 pounds. And he could run, but he knew back in those days that he wanted to be a professional athlete, and he worked diligently towards that. Played on a state single-A basketball championship team there at Central High School. Was heavily recruited for football. So Michigan, Ohio State, some other big schools were a part of many that wanted a piece of him from a football perspective. Michigan State also showed interest, but he wanted to do both. And the difference for him, Brian, was that as a basketball player, the mid-majors were the ones. He's 6'4", not 6'8". And so 6'8", he's going to North Carolina. He's going to Louisville. He may have an offer to go to UCLA. but at 6'4", it was some smaller schools from a basketball perspective. But again, during that process, there were a lot of different coaches that he got a chance to meet, got to hang out with a little bit, the guys that worked him out. He took the 5 visits and decides on Michigan State because near the end of that process, part of the dialogue was that we'll let you do both. And so he chooses to be a Spartan. That's a dream come true for him. He gets to stay close to home, or at least closer to home. Ann Arbor is a little bit closer to Detroit than is Lansing, but he gets to be with Nick Saban and Tom Izzo. Are you kidding me? What a great combination in terms of coaching prowess, but it didn't turn out the way that he wanted to. And you mentioned a little bit about Saban. He didn't even get a chance to go out on the basketball court. Once he got there, Nick had a conversation with him. And as you mentioned, Brian, just a few moments ago, it didn't go very well. Antonio was basically given an option of it's one or you're done, not the one and done, or in this case. So he ends up leaving. Talk a little bit about, the Michigan State, the Eastern Michigan, and then the trip to California. Some interesting things happened to him there during that transfer portal time where he ends up leaving Michigan State.
Well, he ends up transferring out. He ends up transferring to Eastern Michigan. He played there part of a season before ended up transferring again to the College of Sequoias in a junior college in California where he had to get his academics right. He had to focus on a lot of things. He really, the first 2.5 years of his collegiate career was just being able to change and to adapt. People say, okay, you're going to come to Michigan. He had more time to study. He wasn't really going to play sports. And then he transfers to Eastern Michigan, and then it's all sports, and then he can't really study, so then he's got to go get his grades right. And then he ends up transferring again after the College of Sequoias back to Kent State University, where he became a member of the Golden Flashes. 2 seasons as a power forward there. In his junior year, he averaged 16, 8, and 2.7, which is really, really good. If you're doing that at any sort of, like if he's doing that at Michigan State, if he's doing, like you said, at North Carolina, if he was 2 or 3 inches taller, I think he's getting a lot of NBA consideration. I think a lot of National Basketball Association teams are giving him a call saying, hey, Antonio, we'd like you to come play small forward or power forward for us, maybe at the next level. But unfortunately for him, like you said, only being 6'4" versus being 6'7", 6'8", what he needs to be, doesn't quite have it. But they had a ton of success there where they were the Mid-American Conference champions. They finished 24-5 overall with a 17-1 record in the MAC, which Gates helped them win their second consecutive MAC tournament, which ended up resulting in a berth in the NCAA tournament in 2002. He gave a really good performance in the Elite Eight as a 10 seed where they upset the 7th seed was Oklahoma State, 2 seed Alabama, and then ended up beating 3 seed Pittsburgh. He received an honorable mention as an All-American as a senior from the Associated Press. He averaged 20.6, 7.7, and 4.1 assists over the course of his tenure in the senior year. Finished with a total record of 54-16 in 2 years of playing. They actually retired his jersey on February 27th, 2010. He's just the 4th Golden Flash in the school's history to actually receive that honor. And that was, not a bad collegiate career for basketball. The only difference is you need to be a little bit taller.
Yeah, the wins, the hard work, different things. The thing that sticks out in my mind regarding that is relationships. When he was at Michigan State, there was an assistant coach named Stan Heath who ended up getting the head job at Kent State. And he received a call, Stan did, from Antonio while he was out in California, said, hey, coach, you remember me? I wanted to play both. I wasn't able to do so I'm basketball only. Do you have a spot on your roster at Kent for me? And Stan Heath was pretty tough on him and says, not the way it is right now. Get your associate's degree, play there, work hard, and then we'll talk. And that's exactly what Antonio did. It kind of really focused on his academics and got his degree, played well at College of Sequoias out there in Northern California, but kept that relationship open in a way. So my tip to everybody out there, you never know whose hand that you're shaking today that you'll want to shake again in your tomorrow. So make sure you make a good first impression. And his numbers certainly indicated that it was a wise decision on both parts and had a great career, as you mentioned, Brian, at Kent State. Got to play in the NCAA tournament at least once, have some upsets, be a part of that. but his desire to play football, even though he didn't play a single down in college, was still there. And part of the reason that he ended up having a couple of tryouts after he was done with his basketball career is because someone said, you know what, you're 6'4". And if you were, as Brian mentioned, 6'7", we'd be talking to you with the Lakers or the Knicks or the Spurs. Any of the 30 teams would be much more interested, but not a 6'4" power forward. It's just not going to happen. And so he decided to have a workout or two, a couple of different teams. Houston had some interest. So did New England. He really wanted to go to Indianapolis. Having the decision to call your own workout and be able to pick the team that you want to is a freedom that very few players get to experience. But along with that comes the fact that you're not being drafted, so the big money wasn't there. He ends up signing with the Chargers, and what a difference maker that was for him. Like the weather, like one of the coaches, and more importantly, there was a space on the roster for him. So discuss a little bit about that transition from college to the pros, and obviously making the right decision, eventually ending up with a fantastic career there in San Diego. But it didn't start with him starting. He had to wait for about 3 or 4 games before he got into the lineup. Share a few thoughts there on that transition and then early days in San Diego.
Well, I would say his first year maybe is a wash because, if you're that far removed from playing football really at any level like he was, and then it's a total adjustment period. But he was one of the first guys where you talk about it now. Announcers will bring it up all the time, or tight ends and receivers. He boxed the guy out when you're going up for a jump ball, when you're maybe going deep down the field, and you're able to use your body to remove a defender from space without maybe necessarily making contact with them, and generating more room for your quarterback to throw the football. Antonio was one of the first guys that really did that. He kind of initiated, that phrase that we use a lot now, as far as a two-sport athlete, be able to say, hey, I'm playing football, but I'm going to take everything that I learned from basketball and I'm going to incorporate it into what I'm doing here. He had a really subpar year one. He only ended up having, I think it was 24 catches. He only scored 2 TDs, but after that, it was flash in a pan. I don't think he had another year where he had less than 7 touchdowns. His rookie year in 2003, he didn't have under 7 touchdowns until 2013. So he had 10 years where he had, I think it was 7+ in every single year. He would get open. I know, luckily for him, he had 2 of the best to ever do it as far as the quarterbacks are, with Drew Brees and Phillip Rivers consecutively. That doesn't really hurt your cause. But Antonio held his own in the league, and he caught on very quickly. I mean, there are some guys where you bring them in where they've played football their whole life, and they come into play a position professionally, and it takes them 2, 3, 4 years, maybe through their entire rookie contract, before they actually get going, before they're actually really productive, and before they become sort of a household name. And Antonio just kind of blew past that and expedited the process. And he was just an absolute menace. Didn't really drop the ball, had really good hands, had really good footwork. And what he was able to do in San Diego, and then, they're LA now, but you got to give some, props and shout out San Diego. But Antonio was, I mean, at the time of his retirement, Gronk wasn't really there yet. Travis Kelce wasn't really there yet. He was second to none.
He had a guy like Tony Gonzalez to be a quote unquote mentor, at least from a on film perspective of who can I learn from and how can I play this game at a better level. I give Tony the credit of being the first to say it. I don't think he was the first, but at least I heard it from him first, where he said, basketball made me a better football player, and football made me a better basketball player. Having played both in high school, I understand exactly what he means. The basketball aspect of being able to move and find an open spot and being able to sit there, the way you pivot. His option routes as a football player were much improved. His ability to put his back to a safety or a linebacker and face the quarterback and be able to reach, putting his body in between the ball and the defender. I get it. And the toughness that football makes you a better basketball player in terms of your ability to take contact and have a collision with somebody on the hardwood court. I find that to be absolutely amazing and a true statement. And Phillip Rivers, you mentioned Drew Brees. but also Doug Flutie early on were three of the quarterbacks that threw it to him. He caught a couple of touchdowns from one other player. Oddly enough, not a quarterback. It was LaDainian Tomlinson, but LaDainian threw 2 touchdowns to him during his career there with the Chargers. But they had a little conversation, I guess you could say, in the meeting rooms. And if later in the career, Philip Rivers will say this, if we had man-to-man coverage with Antonio, it was his ball. Everyone else knew that they're not getting it. You run your route, don't look bad on film, make sure you do what you're supposed to, but we're getting the ball to that big guy right there, because his ability to, one, come up with a 50-50 ball and catch it. Two, you mentioned his great hands, and he will come down with it, right? More often than not. But three, that he creates a throwing lane. He understood the geometric aspect of the lanes and connecting the dots in terms of coverage and how to find an open spot. And Philip valued that. An option route to Antonio Gates, again, he's getting the ball. And you're going to get 8, 10, 12 yards. And if he's running a seam route, you might even get a touchdown out of it. So his ability in terms of, not playing in college at all, but being able after that first year just to be the guy, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I mean, his career numbers speak for themselves. His longevity was tremendous. I mean, he got there originally in 2003. He walked away, waiting to cement himself, break a couple of records, eclipse, as far as touchdowns and yards in 2018. But at the end of the day, he finished with only, just shy of 12,000 total yards and 116 total touchdowns. No big deal there. I wouldn't say that's too bad of a stat line for a basketball guy, but he's getting a gold jacket because he worked hard and he was able to adapt at anything that was thrown at him, and he made the best of it. And kudos to him for doing so.
Yeah, an undrafted 2003 signee, played with the San Diego Chargers for all 16 of his years. He's a Legends ambassador with the Chargers organization still. 3 times he was a first-team All-Pro. He was a second-team All-Pro 2 additional years. He went to 8 Pro Bowls. He's on the NFL All-Decades team from the 2000 to 2009. He's on the 50th anniversary team with the San Diego Chargers. He's in their Hall of Fame. His Kent State number of 44 was retired. You mentioned the statistics that he had, but most importantly, he's a member of the 2025 NFL Hall of Fame class. So our congratulations go to Antonio Gates for his accomplishments on the hardwood court as a basketball player in college and high school, but most certainly for what he was able to do and how he changed route running for the tight end position in the National Football League. So congratulations to him, Antonio Ethan Gates, a Hall of Famer and a legend that we wanted to talk about here today. So for Brian LeBel and Vincent Turner, who's not with us here today, Jeremiah Long has been our producer and engineer. We want to say thank you for tuning in to 100 Yards of Football, everybody. This has been a special Legends edition, a Super Bowl collection, if you will, where Antonio Gates was honored there in the third quarter for being the newest member of the National Football League Hall of Fame. Have a great day, everybody. We thank you for tuning in.